number 14229231. Guardsman Dennis Haydock, number 2 Squadron, 1st Battalion, Coldstream Guards. Nickname, Hank. Now there's a story. They used to call me Haydock. Now you think being a haddock I'd be able to swim, wouldn't you? But I can't. And then, one day, coming back to our hut after breakfast, I see Les Anson leaning against the open door, rolling a cigarette. And he calls out to Tug Wilson and to others already inside. "Say guys, here comes Hank, our new top hand." So now it's Hank. I don't know why. It rhymes with tank, I suppose. I never expected to be in the Guards, you know. I never even aspired to being in the Guards, because, well, I'm a weakling. I'm 5'10", only weigh about 8 stone. At school, the welfare report says I'm malnourished. Well, my mother and father, they can't get much of a job. They struggle because they can't speak properly. They're deaf and dumb. I have to communicate with them on my fingers. So I'm very, very thin. Thin as a lat. And I'm a bit immature, you know, a bit shy and reserved. So the last thing I expect is to be selected for the Coldstream Guards. It's 12 weeks of very tough discipline. But now I'm feeling really fit. Fitter than I've ever been and full of confidence. And I weigh 10.5 stone. And I'm commended for my shooting. The weapons instructor writes in my small arms handbook, "A good man and a good shot needs no coaching." We're allocated beds in Nissen huts in the woods, and there's a bit of an argy-bargy about who's on which bunk. Les Anson's quick to claim a top bunk, but before we even get a chance to settle in, Sergeant Fawcett's here, reminding us that every single day, before breakfast, he wants the stove and the fire buckets polishing with shoe polish, the floors washed, the beds made, with kit laid out for inspection. We'll be undertaking field practice, gas exercises, with and without respirators, firing on Filingdale Range, and first thing tomorrow, after morning parade, will be a full route march. Night comes, and we can barely sleep for sound of summer rain drumming on corrugated roof, like a child on a tin drum. There's not much room between the rows of camp beds, and it's already getting a bit stuffy in here, what with smell of old tobacco and fumes from stove, not to mention odour of bodies after a hard day on the exercise, if you know what I mean. And then, just as I succumb, the screeching reveille of the orderly bugler has me leaping out of bed, and we're parading outside our hut in naught but our gym vests and shorts, but with boots on. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. After an all-day route march over the moor, we come back absolutely exhausted, and the lads are all heading for the naffy. But I see, from the lovely handwriting, that a letter's arrived from Dorothy, and I'm calling out to Tug Wilson and Bradbury, "I'll catch you up." I'm tearing the envelope open, and there's a photo of her. First time I laid eyes on Dorothy was the night of the Sheffield Blitz, at a dance at St Nathaniel's Church Hall, and we danced to the records of Victor Sylvester. All of a sudden the sirens start wailing, and next thing, vergers requesting everyone make their way to the community air raid shelter. But we keep dancing. Dancing and dancing. That is, till we feel the earth vibrating with falling bombs. Then we're running like blazes to shelter. The whole sky is illuminated by the orange glow of a city burning. The sound of the music from that night, it stays with me forever. We spend Christmas here at Duncombe Park, and early in 1944 we start preparing to go on winter manoeuvres up on the Wolds. Now, it's bitterly cold at the moment, and when we get up on the Wolds there's so much snow we're having to sleep in bivouacs at the side of the tank. We even have to wash and shave in the open air. It's not a very pleasant experience, I can tell you. We don't realise there now similar this area is to the Bocage country in France. A few days later, and we're returning to Helmsley, to the warmth of our Nissen huts, but not before we hose the Wolds mud off the tanks. And then we move up to the tank hut, or the elephant hut as it's known. No prizes for guessing why. We're giving the tanks a full once-over before the last parade of the day. Inside, there's a maintenance pit dug into the cold concrete floor, so the tank engineers can get underneath and do a full inspection, and any repairs needed. Bradbury's cleaning out the turret, and I lay out the kit for inspection. March comes, and one morning the whole battalion is called to parade, and the brigadiers addressing us, stick under arm, telling us that in 2 days' time, on March the 22nd at 1600 hours, the camp is to receive a top-secret visitor. Turns out it's none other than the King himself, and with him the Queen, and the Princess Elizabeth and Margaret. We line up in squadron block, in 3 ranks well closed up. The King and the Brigadier are in front of a small procession of half-track white scout cars, making their way up this concrete road. All muzzle covers, camouflage nets and sheeting has to be removed from the tanks. Troops are being ordered to cheer as His Majesty passes. Headdress is to be removed and held in the right hand. Best battle dress is of course worn. Even the cooks are parading outside the cookhouse in clean cook's dress. Well, by 1700 hours, all the excitement is over and the King leaves. But the next day, the following message is received from the brigade commander. Their Majesties and Princess Elizabeth were very pleased indeed with all they saw yesterday. Time passes quickly at the moment, and suddenly it's time to say goodbye to Duncombe Park. It's now we learn of the forthcoming invasion of Normandy. We're being given orders to assemble in a cinema in Brighton, and we know something's up because suddenly there's General Montgomery right in front of us, and he's telling us what's expected of us and wishing us well. And now, today, the 30th of June, we're moving off to Gosport with our tanks, ready to cross the channel. People are lining the route and cheering and arm waving, and sitting here in the boat, I'm trying to take in the spectacle of hundreds of boats and ships of all sizes. Darkness comes, and we begin to move off to Normandy. The boat eventually beaches near Courcey, and fortunately we're driving ashore through only 2 or 3 feet of water. Some tanks on other boats are not as fortunate. My heartbeat is thumping loudly as one by one we move off into pitch darkness, advancing. Our first stop is going to be Tilly-sur-Seulles. There's hardly a wall standing. The whole town has been completely devastated. A terrible sight. German defence trenches, and inside enormous numbers of dead German soldiers, all bloated and blue with the heat, with bloody holes in their chest and faces. Of those whose faces are visible, you can see expressions of fear and pain. The smell coming from the trenches and from the cows and horses what have been killed, it's absolutely horrible. It's an unmistakable smell, the smell of death. While we're on the move, we get the tins out whenever we stop and make a cup of tea. how to make a cup of tea whilst on move. I take 1 petrol tin, a square one, not a jerry can, and cut it in 2. Fill 1/2 with earth, and onto that pour a bit of petrol. Then get a match and set it alight. On top of this goes the other half, which you need to fill with water. Bring to boil and add tea, or rather, compo. It's not normal tea, it's horrible stuff. It's called compo because it's a composition of tea, sugar and milk powder. Horrible, but it's better than nothing. There's this one time, we're near a battery of 5.5 howitzers just south of Con, which, by the way, has been really badly damaged. And we're just finishing a cup of compo when, out of nowhere, this shell comes over and explodes right next to our makeshift toilet, on which one of our men just happens to be sitting. And as we're running for cover, we see him jump up and he's dashing across to his tank with his trousers round his ankles, trying to restore them to the proper position, with explosions going off behind him. We're going into action again. To tell you the truth, I'm not looking forward to it. It's August the 10th, and our troop is up the hill in an orchard, supporting a battalion of Irish Guards who are trying to take the road between Vere and Vassy, a very strategic road. And we're moving off down the hill in full view of the enemy. Well, several tanks have already been knocked out. There's shell and mortar fire everywhere, and I'm firing at spots of light on the opposite hillside. The empty shell cases are clattering down against the steel floor of the turret. The noise at gunfire, voices on radio, intercom through headphones. It's bedlam. We've never seen on exercise what gunfire looks like when it's directed at us. And suddenly, the tank shudders. But it's okay, and we're carrying on. It shudders again. And suddenly, the shell pierces the gun mounting shield, and pieces of the inside of the tank armour are breaking away and flying around the tank, piercing my arm and face, and even smaller pieces pepper my chest. We've got to get out, but it's hurting so much, and I'm looking down and it looks like my arm's lying on floor at turret. We're getting out as fast as we can, and we're congregating at the rear of the tank, and my arm's bleeding profusely. But we have to start running for cover, across to a hedge, and we follow the line of it. The shell and mortar fire all around us, and we're passing Irish Guardsmen in slit trenches. Poor devils, but we have to keep going, me in the lead. 2 German soldiers, behind a machine gun, hidden in the hedge, sir. The officer's going forward. It's okay, He's signalling for us to come forward. The soldiers are dead. And we're carrying on. And we're following the hedge left, out of sight of the enemy. And it's only now we stop and they're dressing my bleeding wound. I'm reaching into my left breast pocket, next to my heart, to find my cigarettes. And the case has 2 holes through it. And my army prayer book. And I'm looking at them. Looking at the 2 holes, and at my bleeding arm, and at my heart, thinking these have just saved my life. And the next thing, they're taking me to field hospital and wheeling me into theatre, removing splinters from my arm, but they can't get all of them, and they're saying I have to go back to England for more surgery. Any more here will probably damage the muscle of my arm. And the nurse is leaning over me, removing peppered pieces from my chest and face. And I'm on my way home. And I can see faces of crowds of people cheering as we're arriving back home, and a huge banner waving in the wind. Welcome to our heroes of Normandy. I wake up in the Royal Infirmary of Sunderland Hospital. To my horror, especially as our ward is proving very popular with the nurses. I find myself wearing a rather conspicuous and baggy sky blue hospital uniform. Well, Dorothy and I aren't having a very good relationship at the moment, and I don't know whether to write and ask her to visit or not. An old lady seems to have adopted me. She keeps bringing me buttered scones. What I really need is some notepaper, but I just get told, "Don't you know there's a war on?" After being declared fit again, I'm given 10 days leave. After about 7 days, I'm ordered to report to Pirbright immediately. And a few days later, I'm at sea again, in a landing craft, sailing for Dieppe. And I rejoin No. 2 Squadron. And everyone's surprised to see me, including Les Hansen, saying, "Hello, I thought you were dead." We're billeted now in a German village, Hillenburg, and all the civilians are being moved out so we can occupy their houses. It's December now. The squadrons in the battalion have to take turns at holding the front line. The area, it's like a flat moorland covered in a thin layer of snow. We change places with those dug out nearer the enemy. The Germans here occasionally send shells over, which hiss by, scattering leaflets all over the place. The message on the leaflets conveys the fact that to enjoy Christmas, all we have to do is walk forward and give ourselves up. It was my 21st birthday the other week, and tomorrow is Christmas Day. Now, we're in Nerealism for about 6 weeks, suffering the noise and silence of many a buzz bomb. You get noise, then silence. Noise, silence. It's now April the 1st. Not only Easter Sunday, but April Fool's Day. And we're the leading battalion. Our squadron's the leading squadron, and we're the leading troop. And our tank's the leading tank. The first tank. Our objective is to capture a bridge over a large canal at Enschede and stop the Germans in their tracks. And we're approaching the bridge, but there's a huge bomb on each corner of it. Our tank commander's reporting bombs to Squadron HQ on radio, but we're still being ordered to cross the bridge and form a bridgehead. And we're crossing the bridge at full speed, and I'm praying these bombs won't be detonated before we get across. All 3 tanks get across before there's a terrible whoosh of an explosion. The bridge has been blown and we're isolated from our squadron. I'm being ordered to fire my Browning 303 at everything I can see. All windows in flats down road, anything that moves. Suddenly, a German army bus is coming towards us. I fire at the bus and it turns a sharp right. Soldiers are jumping off the bus as it turns, and I'm obliged to fire on them as they're running for cover. I spot a German with a bazooka in the field to our right, but I can't bring my machine gun to bear on him. And I'm reporting to Lieutenant Jardine, but before he can turn the turret, the bazooka's fired at us and our right-hand track breaks, and the tank's hurtling off the road onto the embankment of the bridge. We're evacuating the tank as quick as we can, and we're hurrying down, shielded by the embankment, down to the water. We have to get back to our squadron, but that means we're going to have to swim across the river because the bridge has been blown. But I can't swim, can I? And further down the canal and beyond the bridge we can see Germans crossing to our side in a small boat. The others are swimming across, but I can't swim. Lieutenant Jardine, he's trying to persuade me to go as far as I can with his help. I'm wading in water. Suddenly, thank God, I can feel balustrade at bridge below the surface. It's rather a funny experience because under the water, with my feet, I can feel handrail of the bridge that's been blown up, and it's bringing me to safety. And we're clambering onto other shore without our boots and jackets, absolutely freezing and wet through. And we're running in single file along the bottom of the embankment, being fired on all the way. And suddenly, There's Mr. Boscawen's tank as we're coming to the road. The tank is ablaze. I shall never forget the horrific sight of Les Anson's corpse burning on the back of that tank. Strangely, he's lying on his back in a sitting position. Tug Wilson and Bradbury are also dead. The officer, Mr. Boscawen, and Bland, the driver, are severely burned. We have to keep going. And we're trying to throw ourselves on the back of Mr. Sedgwick's tank, and he's taken us to a place of safety, a Dutch farmhouse, and the Sergeant Major's pouring us drinks and giving us dry clothes. And the next thing, we're moving back to Enschede to join the squadron. And we get there and they're saying that the squadron's gone into a German village, Berg. Unknown to them, German paratroopers are hiding in the upstairs rooms of the village. And as our tanks have filled the main street, they've fired down on them. Fired down on them. All dead. Every single last one. Dead. Everything's spinning. My knees are buckling and I'm sitting on a petrol jerry can in a semi-conscious state. All the rest of our squadron. Dead. Why do we have to kill each other? All these poor people killed, it's daft. Sergeant Major's taken me to company orders and squadron commander's suggesting that being knocked out of 2 tanks is enough for anyone. And he's asking me if I'd be willing to be a batman. As far as I'm concerned, anything's better than going back into one of them galvanised mess tins. But I can't. I can't, sir. I can't abandon my comrades. Spring is on the way, and the end of hostilities isn't far away. Though the war's over for the country, we don't get to come home. We don't see VE Day. It's 1947 when we moved to Cuxhaven and board a ship for Harwich. And in no time we're back in Caterham. Back where it all started. I'm 23. Before I leave Caterham, Captain Jessel writes in my discharge papers, "Military conduct exemplary. This is the most admirable man, who is intelligent, honest, and thoroughly reliable. He can be relied on to fill any position of trust. He will go a long way in civilian life." The shrapnel pieces are still in my arm. Dorothy and I find each other again, and the following year we're married at St Mary's Church, Sheffield. Meanwhile, in Duncombe Park, our Nissen huts disappear. The frames and corrugated roofs quickly removed, only to reappear across farmsteads in North Yorkshire. The Naffy huts donated to the local scouts in Helmsley for their meetings. And nature sets about its steady job of clambering over the concrete remains, reclaiming the woods. And the old oaks breathe a sigh of relief and listen once again to the peace and silence. I lose touch with the lads, all but Ken Herworth. He shared a billet with me in Neuralism. And then, one day at York Station, I bump, quite literally, into Sergeant Fawcett, after 40 years. and the memories flood back. Later, as a widower, I joined the York Normandy Veterans Association, but I'm no longer Hank the Tank, or even Haydock. Instead, my veteran comrades welcome me with a new name, one that stays with me forever. Look out, lads, here he comes, Dennis the Menace. Well, once a guardsman, always a guardsman.
You can always tell a guardsman, wherever he may be,
in London or in Edinburgh or Birchington-on-Sea, the way he squares his shoulders, the way he wears his cap, and the way he sits a pretty girl upon his massive lap.